What if the love of your life turned out to be your sibling? Imagine building a life together, falling in love, getting married, having a child, only to discover a devastating secret that shatters everything. This is the heartbreaking true story of Mandla and Emily, a couple whose perfect life was torn apart by fate. It all started as a beautiful romance between a young man from South Africa and a woman from the United States. Their love knew no boundaries until a shocking revelation turned their world upside down. A secret buried in the past would change their lives forever. How did this happen? And what would they do now? Stay with me as we uncover the tragic story that left a family broken and love lost in the cruelest twist of fate. Mandla was a young man with a promising future. Born and raised in Johannesburg, South Africa, he grew up in a home filled with love, discipline, and faith. His father, Mr. VC Sao, was a highly successful businessman, a man of strong values who worked tirelessly to provide his family with a life of luxury. His mother, Mrs. Lorado Sao, was the heart of the home, a devoted homemaker who ensured that love and warmth filled every corner of their house. Together with his two younger siblings, Mandla's childhood was one of comfort and strong family bonds. From an early age, Mandla showed exceptional intelligence and ambition. He excelled in school, standing out as a top student with big dreams of making a difference in the world. His goal? To study abroad and bring back knowledge that could contribute to his home country. His parents, particularly his father, encouraged his aspirations, believing that education was the key to success. And then, the moment arrived. Mandla received an acceptance letter from Anderson University in New York. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, a stepping stone toward the bright future he had always envisioned. His father, filled with pride, assured him that all expenses would be taken care of. "You'll be great, my son," he said, placing a firm hand on Mandla's shoulder. "You'll come back and make South Africa proud." And with that, Mandla packed his bags, said an emotional goodbye to his family, and boarded a plane to the United States, unaware that this journey would not only change his life forever, but unravel secrets that had been hidden for decades. Mandla stepped off the plane and into a world unlike anything he had ever known. The towering skyscrapers, the flashing lights, the constant hum of the city. It was overwhelming, yet exhilarating. New York was a place of endless possibilities, and Mandla was ready to embrace every challenge. At Anderson University, he quickly adjusted to his new life, excelling in his studies and immersing himself in the diverse culture around him. But nothing could prepare him for the moment that would change everything. One afternoon, while searching for a book in the university library, Mandla reached for a title, only to have his hand brush against someone else's. He looked up and met the warm, captivating gaze of Emily Johnson. With light brown skin and a radiant smile, she was breathtaking. "Looks like we both have good taste in books," she teased playfully. Flustered yet intrigued, Mandla introduced himself, and from that moment, a friendship began, one that would soon blossom into something far deeper. As weeks turned into months, Mandla and Emily became inseparable. They studied together, explored the city, and shared their dreams and fears. Emily was fascinated by Mandla's South African roots, and he, in turn, was drawn to her kindness and infectious energy. Then one evening, in the soft glow of an intimate Italian restaurant, Mandla reached across the table, his heart pounding. "Emily, I can't imagine my life without you. Will you be my girlfriend?" With tears in her eyes, Emily leaned in and kissed him. "Yes, Mandla, I'd love to." Their love only deepened over the years. After graduating, they decided to marry, sealing their bond in a beautiful, intimate ceremony. Though Mandla's parents couldn't attend in person, they watched proudly through video, celebrating their son's happiness from across the ocean. Soon after, their love story welcomed a new chapter, the birth of their son, Zola. Their life together seemed perfect, but fate had a secret waiting for them, one that would turn their dream into a nightmare. Years had passed since Mandla first set foot in America, and now it was time to return home, not alone, but with his wife, Emily, and their son, Zola. He had always dreamed of introducing them to his family, to the land that shaped him. Excitement filled the air as their plane touched down in Johannesburg. Alongside them was Emily's mother, Mrs. Johnson, eager to experience the rich culture of her son-in-law's homeland. As they stepped into the Sow family's luxurious home, they were met with warm embraces. Mr. Visai and Mrs. Lorado Sow were overjoyed to finally meet their grandson and daughter-in-law. Laughter echoed through the house as little Zola ran around, playing with his uncles. Emily was welcomed with open arms, her curiosity and appreciation for Mandla's heritage instantly winning the family over. That night, they gathered around the dinner table, sharing a traditional South African meal, pap, braai, and chakalaka, flavors that awakened Emily's senses and left Mrs. Johnson marveling at the richness of the cuisine. Over the next few days, Mandla proudly took his family on a journey through his past. They explored the vibrant markets of Soweto, where the sounds of drums and singing filled the air. They stood in awe at the breathtaking views of the cradle of humankind, where history whispered through the ancient landscapes. Every experience brought Emily closer to understanding the depth of her husband's roots. To Mandla, this was more than just a trip. It was a homecoming, a moment of unity between the two worlds he loved. But beneath the surface of this perfect reunion, a storm was quietly brewing, one that would shatter everything they believed to be true. As Mrs. Johnson explored the city with her daughter and son-in-law, an unsettling feeling crept over her. Certain landmarks triggered memories, faint, distant, but persistent. She had been here before, many years ago, on a brief work trip. But there was something more, something buried deep in her past that she couldn't quite grasp. Then one evening, as they all sat in the Sow family garden sipping tea, her eyes fell on Mr. Visai. A strange familiarity washed over her. His face, his voice, it all felt too familiar. Her heart pounded as she turned to him. "Mr. Sow," she began cautiously, her voice barely above a whisper. "Have you ever traveled to the United States? Perhaps years ago?" Mr. Visai paused, his expression shifting slightly. "Yes," he admitted. "For business, on a few occasions." "Why do you ask?" Mrs. Johnson swallowed hard, her hands trembling. "I met someone here in Johannesburg, decades ago, a businessman. It was brief, but something about you. It's as if I've met you before." Silence fell over the table. Mr. Visai's face paled. A memory long buried clawed its way back to the surface. A moment of weakness from years ago. A fleeting affair he had never spoken of. His hands clenched into fists as realization struck him like lightning. Mrs. Johnson, her breath unsteady, reached into her purse and pulled out an old, worn business card. "I kept this all these years," she said, her voice shaking as she handed it to him. "Is this yours?" Mr. Visai took the card, his fingers trembling. As his eyes scanned it, his entire body stiffened. It was his. The very card he had once given out during his business travels. A cold sweat broke across his forehead as he looked up at Mrs. Johnson, at Emily, then at Mandla. Mrs. Johnson's voice cracked as she whispered, "I never knew his name. I never thought I'd meet him again. But, Mandla, Emily, I think you are." Her voice faltered, unable to say the words. Emily's breath hitched. Mandla's heart pounded in his chest. The truth settled in like a thick fog, suffocating and inescapable. Mr. Visai lowered his head, his voice barely audible. "It was just one night. A mistake. I never knew. Mandla and Emily stared at each other, frozen in horror. Their love, their marriage, their son, it was all built on a foundation of lies. The truth had been buried for years, but now it had surfaced, and nothing would ever be the same again. Mr. Visai sat with his face buried in his hands, the guilt crushing him. He had built a life on strong values, on faith and discipline, but one mistake, one night from his past, had destroyed everything. Mrs. Lorado stood in stunned silence, her heart breaking not just for her son, but for the betrayal she never saw coming. The man she had trusted, the husband she had stood by, had kept a secret that had now torn their family apart. But the ones suffering most were Mandla and Emily. Their love, once pure and unshakable, was now something they could never speak of again. The memories they cherished, their first meeting, their wedding, the birth of their son, were suddenly tainted by a truth too painful to bear. Emily clutched her chest, her breaths coming in shallow gasps. "No, this can't be real," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Mandla, his entire body trembling, looked at her with a mixture of love and agony. "Emily, we have a son." His voice cracked. "What does this mean for Zola?" Their little boy, innocent and unaware, played in the next room, his laughter echoing through the house. But the adults knew the truth. His parents were never meant to be. The weight of their love now felt like a curse. There was no way forward, no way to rewrite fate. Their marriage, their life together, had to end. Emily sobbed as Mandla pulled her into one final embrace, both of them knowing it would be the last. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "I always will." But love wasn't enough anymore, not when the truth had made their future impossible. And as the sun set over Johannesburg, the family they had built lay in ruins, lost to a cruel twist of fate they could never escape. Mandla and Emily faced the hardest decision of their lives. Could they walk away from the love they built, the family they created? Or was there any way to move forward despite the devastating truth? There was no easy answer, only heartbreak. Their love, once their greatest strength, had become their deepest sorrow. Sometimes, fate plays the cruelest tricks. What would you do if you were in their shoes? Could you let go of the person you love most? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.